So, welcome to Tarrant County College. This is Professor Nervo. We're going to be talking about Chapter 1 today. Just trying to get everything set up here real quick. Let's do just a jiffy. All right, so make sure that it's all set up. And it looks like it is. Right here, I went ahead and launched my Mind tab for y'all, but just to show you where it may be, it's right over here. So again, we showed you before, but Mind tab fall 2020, you just would click on that. And then after that, it says fall 2020, click on that. Now what happens is any one of these chapters, you can click on it, but that's probably the fastest way to click on that. So once again, as in previous instructions, make sure that your pop-ups is disabled so you can get into it. If your pop-ups are enabled, then what's going to happen is going to block the launch. There are some instructions here under my tab instructions on how to disable pop-ups that will prevent you from launching. But anyways, you click on that, and then on the far right, you'll see a launch. So we already did that, and then it takes you to the Mind tab. There's two ways to access the book. You can do the introduction here, chapter 1, 2, or 3, or you can click all the way to your right, it says full book. Now if you get the full book, that's a PDF, which is nothing wrong with that. Then you can plug in your pages and take a look at it. And basically that's a printout of the book. Over here, you have a same option, and it gives you the book. So you would click on the chapter itself, and once it opens up, you see this interactive book, which often is what I use. So in the interactive book, you're able to save and make notes, how people make decisions. Like you see this little over here, and then you can highlight it, add notes. This is stuff like that, and then you can come back after that and do whatever you want to do. It talks right there.
How people make decisions. There is no mystery to what an economy is. Whether we are talking about the economy of Los Angeles, the United States, or the whole world, and
you can change the person that's talking, and you can change the speed as well of the person that's talking. So here we want to talk about the PowerPoint. So on here in your class, the content area, if you go south here, you see PPT stands for PowerPoint. So when you click on that, it leads you to this. When you click on that, it allows you to open the PowerPoint, which we have. I'll go ahead and click on it right now. And then you can see the PowerPoint down here, just normal download. And then you open it. So once you have it, you don't have to download it each and every time, because if you do, that's just going to take space away from your computer. And then click on that, and it should pop up where you have all your PowerPoint. Of course, we talked about chapter 1 today. Now we could go back and forth inside, in and out of the book, so it probably will go back and forth sometimes, but we'll let you know. So, but right now, let's go talk about this, and we'll introduce this chapter. So, the principles of economics. It's and again, I'll probably go pretty quick on this because you can see it and you can read it, but I'll try to bring up the main point. The economics, you can see the similarities from the Greek, one who holds managed households. So you're faced with many decisions, and that's going to be throughout your life. Your scarcity is just not enough, and then you're going to have to make choices as to which you want to allocate your resource. If scarcity didn't exist, and scarcity by definition means that there's just not enough to go around. Let's go take a look at scarcity by definition. What might that mean? Scarcity right there.
Scarcity.
And there you are, referred to basic economic problem. There's a gap between limited resource and unlimited want. It's very true that people will want more and more, and and it could be the case where you might sit there and you say you have enough, but typically what the most people have this thing called unsatiated needs, or they want more and more, while the resource have limits, and that leads to a conflict of limits versus unlimited. And again, the unlimited wants, people want more, and it's often the case because if you, like, say, have a house here in the area and you love the beach, every time you have to go to the beach, you have to rent a hotel, which might cost you a couple $100 a night if you have a view of the ocean, and then you have to rent a car, and that's going to cost you a little money, and then you have to go out to restaurants all the time because you're in a hotel, and that's going to cost you some money. So at that time, you might say, well, maybe I'll just buy a little bit of a condominium overlooking the ocean, and so there you go. Now you have two houses, and same idea goes for the mountains. And how many times have we seen people hit the lotto and they thought that they had enough, but now they want everything? So scarcity, limited nature, society, the economics is how society manages those scarce resources and how people make decisions on those scarce resource. Let's study how people make decisions, work, buy, save it, and invest, how people interact with one another. So here are some of the problem. A fraction of the population can't find work, and this is called inflation. So now we go into the principles, how people make decisions, and there are 10 principles. So you see them 1 through 10, but then after you go through those, and each one of them is defined. So let's go about how these are defined right away instead of going where are those 10. So the first one is people face trade-off. There's no such thing as a free lunch if it seems to be where it's free and there's no cost. There's probably something wrong with it because there's a cost hidden somewhere. That could be that you're on scholarship and you're not paying at Tarrant County College, and your your company's paying, or some company out there is paying, or even your mother's paying, but the cost is the burden of that cost is going to be on that company. So you may feel like there's a free lunch, but the cost is somewhere. And if you get the Pell Grant, the cost is pushed down to society as a whole through taxes. So the idea is if it looks like there's no cost, often they're trying to give you this sales pitch where you get everything for free and you just sign over here and there's no catch. It's got to be a catch somewhere. I mean, it could be that you get it for free and they just want to launch a new product or something. But typically, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's a cost somewhere. So since there's a cost and you have limited resources, you have to make a decision. So these are some examples. Parents' income, where's it going to go? And students' time. Since you're limited to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you got to sleep sometimes. So work sometimes, and then you're left with 6, 7 hours at night to what you want to do. So you have a choice. You can study, or you can go play basketball all night, or you can go to the movies. You have to make a decision as to what's going to be the best outcome for you. So if you have a big time test coming up, then possibly that you may want to choose that time studying, or on a Friday you may want to choose that time going to the movies. But since time is limited, then you have a trade-off on your what you want to do. In society, you have choices as well. Do you want strong national defense of consumer goods, guns versus butter? What about the environment, high level of income versus clean environment? So here some of the studies have come out saying if people make a lot of money, often they have to sacrifice a very clean environment. And then the other way, if you have a very clean environment, then you have to sacrifice level of income. Efficiency versus equality, that's often found in different countries. It's in the U.S. It's more about efficiency than equality, as as you don't have to go far to see that, because you'll have very poor people, extreme poverty, and then you have Amazons making millions and billions of dollars because of a very efficient system. So here's slide 10. Let's go and try to match the book on it. Just a minute. What might we be? So the book was right here, and then let's go down to slide 10. Is that first principle, and all that matches. So let's go look at this.
Economic efficiency, basically at the heart of it, what it means is that there's an absence of waste. Okay, so think about this in terms of the production side, think about it in terms of the consumption side. On the production side, what economic efficiency means is that our producers are the lowest cost producers possible, right? It means that our producers are producing the most that they possibly can, given the level of technology that they have. Lowest cost producer. But remember, by costs here, we mean economic costs, not just accounting costs. So applying this to reality, that gets to be a lot more difficult. Same thing on the consumption side. If we are consuming efficiently absent of waste, what that means is the good is being consumed by those people who value it the highest. Oh, but boy, you can see how subjective this gets. How do they value it? How do we measure how they value it? Right? So economic efficiency is one of those things that economists constantly obsess about. We constantly think about this. Is society being efficient? Right? Because we hate inefficiencies. We hate waste, even though understand it can get very difficult to measure efficiency.
So that definitely the case here, where as a country, we hate waste. We want to be very efficient, but at the same time, must remember that you don't want to be so far unequal that you have people so filthy rich, and everybody else is watching them eat breakfast. So, so further down the line in this class, we'll talk about some of the the measures that the United States have put in place to prevent such superpowers. But again, that as of late, they haven't been following these rules, because you have these Amazons and Facebooks and Googles, um, who who have complete control of the media because there's so few. If you look at just let's say platform, you have Google, and then what, Bing, and aside for that, I mean, you're not going too far. So now you have basically a monopoly who controls how you do internet search, and that's what our forefathers are trying to prevent. They want equality, so they would like to see 4 or 5 companies who can dip their toes in the sand as far as like internet searches. But let's go. They always have conflicts of goals, and then face trade-offs. And basically, it just depends on who's making those rules and and decisions. Like for instance, here we see that the environment. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. You see clean environment versus high level of income. So we know that China has chosen high level of income because their environment is really in not very good shape, and then their people are starting to pick up a little bit of extra income. Now, when we say a little bit of extra income, it's still very low comparing to the Western world, but it's gotten better as far as over there from year to year, um, as far as how much they get paid. Believe it or not, for most of China, $5,000 of level of income per year is high, or maybe closer to the average. So, and here in the U.S., $55,000, big difference. So, but the point is Brazil same way. Brazil's picked a high level of income, and their environment is really in the dumps, literally. So we normally see that, but we might not have seen it during the Olympics. So we've had the Olympics last time in Brazil, and the environment was terrible, and the water was polluted. There was there there was these mosquitoes would bite you, and you would miscarry. It's the harbor had sewage going right into it, and then there was oil patches all over the road where the bicyclist was trying to do, the decathlons and stuff like that. So we know that Brazil has chosen high level of income versus clean environment, but at the same time they got a problem because over here they became efficient but not equal. So in Brazil you'll see very few filthy rich people, and then everybody else is poor or very near poverty. So again, this is offset of efficiency, and often the policymakers, the ones at the top, will have to pick one or the other, so so they can have policies to to make life a little bit more equal, or they can have policies to make life a little more efficient. What's happened here in the U.S. is that they've picked this efficient model over equality. So you'll see poverty is not extreme. It's better than most countries, but you still have 40% of the adult population in the United States in poverty. And then you have about top 5% owns almost everything. The top 5% owns 50% of all income, of all wealth, I guess. So principle two, I'm going to go to all 10, and so this is a second. So people face trade-off, make decisions, and I'm sure that's the same for you. There's only one of you, so do you want to work at Papados or do you want to work at Chili's at a particular time? So I don't think that Papados is going to be kind for you to work at Chili's uh, for the, instead of on Friday night. So they're going to want you at least here Friday or Saturday night, and unless of course they pay you, but most likely they're not going to want to share you with another restaurant if you can only, I mean, if you're going to, like, for the main nights of Saturday and Friday night. So you have to kind of make a trade-off. Do you want to go at Tarrant County College, or do you want to go at UTA? All these things, I guess, with online, you may have a case, but the point is that often, like, let's say you want to buy a pickup truck, right? Most people are not buying Chevrolet, then go buy Ford, then go buy Chrysler, and might as well throw in a Toyota Tundra. You go and pick, you look at all fours, and then you choose one. So that's what we're talking about, trade-off. Then the opportunity cost is what you give up. So if you buy a Chevy, you didn't buy a Ford, and that's called opportunity cost. If you decide to work at Papados and you didn't work at Chili's, that's the opportunity cost. What are you really giving up? And of course, there's always sitting at home on a Friday night doing nothing, in which case you may lose tip money. 3, rational people think on a margin. So often what you'll see is the extra gain for the extra loss. So that's what we're talking about, marginal, a small incremental adjustment. So if you decide that you're going to work for Chili's instead of Papados, that's not a life changing decision. It's a decision that you might make for this year or for the next little while, just to make ends meet and get a little tip money. So so most people, when they're asked, are you going to work at Papados, it's not a career choice, and you don't expect to be there in 20 years. You just expect to be there on the margin, right? You don't know when you're going to leave, but if you work at McDonald's, nobody's going to say, uh, welcome to McDonald's. We're so happy that you decided to join us, and you got a job for the next 20 years, right? That you may not want to take that job because then you may be locked in. So, so it's a marginal change. What will that pickup truck do for your life versus another versus not having it here? You made a phone call. Is a marginal benefit greater than the marginal cost? And the fact that she's smiling and looking happy, most likely the marginal benefit exceeds the marginal cost for this phone call. But that's normally what people do. Now, don't expect people to deeply think about marginal benefit versus marginal costs in the smaller decisions. They do that for the bigger decisions. So again, this here a little confusing. If it's smaller, then it would look a little bit. Let me make it so it's big enough right there. So everybody knows what this is, a little sign. So that means greater than. So marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. So what that means again is the benefit that you would gain from deciding to work at Papados on Saturday is going to be greater than the marginal cost of not working at Papados on Friday or Saturday night. And that's how most people think rationally. What what is the extra that they will gain? For people respond to incentives. So often, what happens is in a communist system where the state takes everybody's income and divvies out, often socialist system as well. So what happens is if you want a shiny new boat, there's no incentive to work extra. But in many capitalist countries like ours, uh, perhaps France and many others, what happens is there's incentive to work or to do extra stuff. So of course that's money. Once you get that money, then you can possibly buy something better, or maybe buy buy that house on the beach you've been looking at because you've worked extra. So the incentive to it is extra money, and people respond to incentive. They work harder when there's incentives. Now, if you may have seen in the past 6 months, not six, but few months, that the, the government was giving $600 for unemployment benefits. So $600 for unemployment benefit turned out to be higher than 75% of what people made in the U.S. per week. So what ended up happening is that 75% of the people didn't want to go to work because the it was easier to get the $600 per week and not go to work versus going to work and making say 400 or 350. So it was a conflict of interest. People decided to take the $600 versus working. Eventually, eventually they changed that policy, and now it's like $300. So it's just not so much. Of course, if you have family of four and you're still unemployed, there are other measures that you can get to get closer to $600. But that was the issue about incentive. And in this case, they would have called it disincentive to work because, of course, who wants to work when you can get more money doing nothing? And that also, if you do nothing, then you might be able to do side hustle and you get paid. But the government, the government looked at how much you made, and they would take away your 600 if you worked. All right, so let's go see what we have going on in the book now. Try to match it to the text. So again, this is text. We're now on the ninth edition. We were on the eighth edition. Of course, things changed. Ninth edition is not that big of a difference, but it's still the ninth edition. If you get the eighth and ninth edition, shouldn't make a difference because once you log on to your book, then they would have put you in the correct edition. So again, to get to your I'll do that again. So here's principle 2. We was on the 4. Here we go.
Opportunity cost, right? One way to define opportunity cost is it is the value of what certain resources could have produced had they been used in the best alternative way. All right, well, let's think about that. First off, the idea of cost. Don't get hung up on the idea that cost has to be in terms of dollars and cents. It could be, but not necessarily, right? An opportunity cost could be in terms of time. So think about, for example, what else could you be doing with your time other than studying? Right? Well, maybe you could go watch a movie. Well, in that case, then watching the movie is the opportunity cost of studying. It is what is the best alternative use of those resources, right? But it can also certainly apply to money. Let's suppose that you go out and you spend $2 and you buy yourself a bottle of soda. Well, what else could those $2 have produced for you? Well, maybe they could have bought you a new pencil or a new pen or something like that, right? It is the best alternative use of those resources, but best is ultimately left up to define by you. So you see, opportunity cost actually is very subjective because it is left up to you to define what is the best alternative use of those resources. And that is the idea of opportunity cost.
Okay, rational. Now, when we say rational, of course, we're not talking about like people who's not quite right. We're just talking about uh, people make decisions that's going to make the best outcome possible for them. But sometimes there's o- obvious outcome. Like what happens is people we prefer like a nicer house than the worst house, where it's safe. People prefer a better car than the worst car. That doesn't break down all the time. I mean, people would prefer like a better outfit or better shoes than not stuff like that. So sometimes the rational is obvious, but sometimes it's not. But most of the time, people prefer like better stuff. Who wants to have your place robbed all the time because you don't live in a very good place. So and then the marginal change is the extra. So let's go back to the incentive effect of gasoline. So if the price is too high for cars, then the policy is gonna push for scooters and bicycles and mass transit, and that's what India has done. So what happens is if you're policymakers, then you're going to increase the tax on gas, and then you're going to support bicycles and scooters, or you may even make it where if you let's say go on a scooter that's electric, who will pay for half of the scooter as a society. In other words, if the scooter's say $700, then the state will pay 350 of that scooter, and that way it would incentives put incentive for you to use a scooter versus a car. So, but often the way the it's done is instead of putting incentive on bicycles and scooters, they increase the price of gasoline to make it so expensive that if you're an ordinary person, you can afford it, cannot afford it. So principle five, trade can make everybody better off. So so obviously you specialize in activity, and it in a way that's what we're talking about trade. We can also talk about international trade, but here this area we're talking about like your 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 job skills. So if you're say have a knack for being a doctor, then possibly you should be a doctor. Versus like if you argue all the time and you just love to argue, then maybe you should be an attorney, right? And get paid. And there are people who want to be carpenters, who want to be plumbers, realtors, different things. So they should specialize in those skills, and then be proficient in those and then trade. So what happens is they sell their ability to the market. Companies hire them, they make money, and then with that money, they're able to purchase plumbers and carpenters when they need it, and whatever cause they have to purchase something. So So that's what specializing of skills is, and it's kind of a halfway good idea because some people have just an inability to do special skill versus another. Like if you asked me to be a carpenter, I really couldn't do that. Right? Yeah, I guess I could if I had to, but it would be like writing with my left hand when I'm really right-handed. So not necessarily good at carpenter or painting or anything like that, but there are some who are expert. They do very good work in doing that. Not that it's a lesser or better trade or type of living. I'm just saying that some people are good, like say, for instance, I don't really like the sight of blood, so I really, cannot be a doctor, right? And so we let other people do doctors. They get paid, and then because they're proficient. Now, one crime is that it's not necessarily a crime per by definition of a crime. But if you do a job that you're not really proficient at, let's say you're a doctor because your mother told you to be a doctor, and you become a great doctor, but still because your parents want to be doctors, but really you didn't want to be a doctor, you want to be a farmer, right? And so you go on through life being a doctor when you really want to be a farmer, and that right there, in my opinion, is sad, right? Because you didn't get a chance to do what you really want to do, and then makes you very unhappy to do something that you're really not good at. You may be good at according to the eyes of society, but inside it's not you. So here, communist countries market usually good ways to organize. So communist countries central planning for everything. So if the U.S. was communist, and all the decisions would come out of Washington about everything. So that's not the case here in the U.S. If there's a guy in Seattle who loves to make coffee, then what happens is he makes coffee to the best of his ability, and then he sells it, and then next thing you know, you have a Starbucks in every corner. But in a communist country where central planning is everything, let's say we would have to send our ideas to Washington, D.C., and they would evaluate the coffee that you're making. They would evaluate the tea that you're making. They would have to pass it through Congress and decide if the business is worthy of the government. Let's say it passed through Congress, then it have to pass through Senate, then it have to go through the White House, right? And so if you have, like, say, in the Senate, mostly not coffee drinkers, they may turn down that idea. Well, in our countries like ours, the U.S., that's not the issue. The issue is you have entrepreneurs and you have people with ideas who are going to take it all the way. Now, many of them will lose, and many of them will win. The point is that in the communist countries, there is nobody. Everything's done through the government. So, if you want to see what communist country would look like, you'd have to look at big government bureaucracy here in the United States, like let's say, for instance, the post office. The post office often is inefficient because it's just really really big, and there's still, if you see the postmaster and the post guy up front coming to deliver your mailbox, he's still driving a little van, that a little box car that looks like they had it in 1950, right? Versus a private company like Amazon or UPS or FedEx, and they're coming out with all these fancy trucks in California that like no electric, all that stuff, and you can see that the the government issue postal services is not that efficient, and that often plays out in communist countries like Cuba, maybe Russia. Russia says it's not communist anymore, but we know better, right? North Korea. So we have a lot of inefficiencies in communist countries. Don't think that we're saying that just because we are here in the United States. We're just saying that because that's what it is. Um, if I guess if it was in Russia, we'd have to say that it needs adjustment. So market economy is the United States model, guided guided by self-interest. So let's move on. Number 7, we still need government. Many say no government, but if you don't have government, who is going to enforce your property rights, right? Who's going to enforce the fact that you have a house and you don't like people walking around in your yard, especially in your backyard, right? So you have to call the government, in this case the police, for them to come out and say, why are you doing in this guy's backyard? It does not belong to you, right? Same thing like in a car, right? If you want to go from here to Dallas and you have this guy who needs a ride from here to Dallas, you have a choice because it's your car to give him a ride or not, right? Probably you're going to say no, but but what happens if he says I'm not getting out? You're going to take me to Dallas, right? So the you still need the government some ways. Now what happens is they're may tax a little bit too much, and then you see a lot of government waste, and at that point you might get mad. But you still need government to come out. If you call 911 to resolve your problems. So, and then here promote equality and make sure you don't want to make sure that you don't have just few super rich people and everybody else is poor, which technically we could you could have a point that the U.S. hasn't done very well. I think one day in the summer, Brazos made like something like $13 billion. I'm not sure in the course of a week or something like that, but something that most people could never imagine to make that much. So property right now we've seen what happened in Venezuela, which is just completely fallen off the roof here. There was this guy named Hugo Chavez who said, "Look, if you just see something that you like, just go get it." And then there was no police protection of individual property rights. So at that time, it makes you wonder, why should I even worry about it, or why should I even try for it if the state's going to take it? Remember, was uh, for it says response to incentive, right? And the incentive is money. So if you make extra money, and then you go buy a little extra place in Colorado to, you know, to pull out your skis, in the winter. So you have a little this thing called the chalet, right? And then next time you come up to your chalet, somebody's living in it. So then you call the cops and say, somebody's living in my chalet. And then the cop says, well, they can stay there because they're cold, for whatever reason they have. So at that point, you're like, what's the point of working extra if my rights can't be protected? So let's go. I think we was on 7. There's only 10, but those are called the 10 principles. The So market failure, we have a chapter on externalities and market power. So, but externality in a brief, quick, let's go look, is you're affected by an action that you haven't committed. So that's what externality is. Let me see. Remember, we were scarcity here. So let me pull back and put externalities. And often what people thinking externality, the clear example that people use on that is that if you have somebody smoking and you're not smoking, but you're affected by that smoking. So that's what you call an externality. So the side effect consequence of an industrial commercial activity. So let's go, since they're going to go with that definition, let's go by General Motors over there on 360. So the China County is on 360, but it's way south of General Motors. It's over by I-20. General Motors on Abrams. So anywhere near that plant, you can see, and if you live there, it's nothing personal, but anywhere near that plant, right? What do industrial plants do? They pump out a lot of smoke and a lot of pollution nearby. It appears that General Motors has not been that bad, but the issue is if you go near there, houses are affected by pollution, and therefore the value of the house over in that area is a lot lower, a lot smaller, a lot older, and not as expensive. So, and the further away you go from the plant, the you can start seeing the value go up, right? And that's because of externalities. If you go live by south of I-20, right, or you go to West Arlington over here by Lake Arlington, then the value of the houses go back up. Now, if they decided to put, uh, let's say, a Toyota plant, right, because for a while they was looking for a Toyota plant in Arlington, they ultimately went to, I guess, Plano. But if you had that and you put that in South Arlington, then you most likely would have had the same effect, because people don't want to be, they don't mind the jobs and the money, but as far as living, they know that it's going to have some kind of side effect to live near an industrial plant, and the value of those houses go down. But again, most people, when they think of externality, the clearest is smoking, and now you can't smoke even in a nightclub as before you could, but and that's because they call this thing secondhand smoke. Okay, we got 8, 9, and 10. Um, the standard of living is different across countries who makes money. So when you have a high income money like the United States, standard of living is very high. When you have low income money like Nigeria and say even China, the standard of living is very low. So then you have in the middle, and so ultimately what happens is you can see by value what kind of standard of living there is. So sometimes we have some Nigerian friends who come to our classes and are our students, and they may not like the fact that Nigeria is $1,200 annual income, and then the standard is very low. But those are statistics out there. That's what's saying. So here in the U.S., I think we're a little bit spoiled because we have high standard of living and high income, value income. So often you see people complaining because of things that really shouldn't be complaining. It's called first world problem. But like the temperature is 73 degrees instead of 72. Different things like that. The the food is not quite right. Stuff. I mean, there's many countries that they're happy to eat and not worry about the quality of the food. Of course, you don't want to get sick, but we're talking about, like the flavor or something. So the difference, of course, is productivity. So in the U.S., each worker produces a lot, and of course that has to do with machines. So if you go into some of these African nations, the U.S. or the first world countries, France and Germany and so forth, have not been forthcoming with all the machine equipment um, because again, it's kind of backwards thinking. If they got the machines, they won't need they won't need us. Like, but the idea, of course, is that a lot of people are hurt by these policies. So I mean, I would say just give them the machine, but even with the machine might be tough because um, some places just not designed to have a whole lot of productivity. But here in the U.S., they have a machine for everything, down to tomato pickers and ring makers. Everything's done by a machine, and therefore the productivity is high. So 9, price rise when the government prints too much money. So it's called inflation. Prices are higher. Well, it may have been 68 cents when you got in line, but now it's 74. So the idea is that prices are going up, and with with without any real questions, the prices are going up because the government has printed a lot of money. So you might not see them instantly, but you should start to see them. And if you haven't seen them, then you haven't been looking, or somebody else is buying your groceries because prices are starting to inch up slowly, not to where it's obvious, but it's slow. So now I think before the third. And of course, there's more to it than that in the world economy. But price of gas is $1.99, and I think before it was like $1.75. It's gone up, um, and then housing and apartments, those are going to go up because the more money you print, the more things are going up. The whole idea is if you're looking at this box, right? See this box, and you hire. Let's say you had so much money and each one of these letters had some kind of value, right? So, and maybe some more than others, like the E was worth more than, say, a C, right? So ultimately, people would buy letters, right, and numbers and so forth. But what happened is this box is not getting bigger, and these letters are not getting more. It's still the same writing. But if you pump more money into the box, then what happens is that the prices per letter is going to go up, right? Because now you have more money chasing the same letters, and it's the same principle with um with land ownership and like uh, tomatoes and cars, whatever is out there that's being sold, if you pump more money into your economy, then you're going to have higher price because you have more money chasing the same stuff. So, and then 10, society faces a short one between inflation and unemployment, and that's called the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve, short one effect of monetary ejection. So ultimately, what we're saying here is you either have one or the other. You have high price or high unemployment. That's what we call the Phillips curve. So let's go take a look at that. If I can find my deal. Hold on, right there. So, and I guess in this one, I can plug in. Uh, I don't know what Google looks like that today, but Phillips curve, if I can spell it. So I can pick any one of these, but I'll just go ahead and pick this one. So what happens is here it is. So you see inflation over here, and then you see unemployment rate over here. So what Principle 10 is saying is if you can't have A and B at the same time. So if you have A, you have high unemployment, but low inflation. So what that means is the price is not going up that quick, but you do have like a lot of people not working. On point B, you have high inflation rate, like 5%, and then you have 3% unemployment. So so um, that's called the Phillips curve. So you either have B or you either have A, one or the other. Then you can go further down the deal over here. So in this case, let's say in this point right here, which is not identified, you would have 8% unemployment, means that 8% of your population can't find work, that's looking for work. Then you may have 1% inflation rate. Now, of course, the principle behind that is that if you, let's say you can't find a job, right? You're here, so you have no money. If you have no money, then you might not be at the store buying things. And since very few people have money, then very few people buy stuff. So therefore you have low prices. And here on the other flip coin is, let's say you're around 3% unemployment rate. That means most people who want a job have a job, and that means they're getting paychecks. And if they're getting paychecks, they're going to go buying, right? And so therefore the prices go up because then the sellers or the stores know that they're going to get paid. So anyway, so they're going to to charge higher prices. So most of the time, Principle 10 works. There are sometimes in history it hasn't worked, and in fact here today, uh, in this year U.S. it's not working because we have a high inflation rate and then high unemployment. But if you look at what the policy people are saying in Washington, it's not the case, right? So what they're saying, let me find it again. Hold on, right there. What they're saying is we're somewhere at point A. We have high unemployment, low inflation. So we're somewhere at maybe 10% unemployment. Of course, a lot of it due to the pandemic and low inflation, which is kind of an economic weirdness, right? Because they've been printing a lot of money and you should expect high inflation, but you haven't seen it. So it makes you wonder where the money's at, right? Because if the money's not in the stores, if people not buying anything, right, and you have high unemployment and the government's dished out a bunch of cash, it makes you wonder, right? So I know a lot of people have been buying through Amazon, so I know some of the money's there, but it's not all of society going through Amazon. So um, makes you question where all this money is, the trillions of dollars that the government's printing out. And I kind of have an idea where it might be, and I give you a hint. It's called the Dow Jones Industrial. So ever since, looks like it might be heading south. It started high, but now it's going down and quick. But the whole idea is if you look at 6 months, it started printing the money. Look at it, it's going straight up, right? Not straight up, but it went from 17 all the way to where is it now? 28. So we're looking at what 30% increase. So I think maybe some of the money's there. All right, so that's principle 10, 1 through 10. Thank you very much for joining this session. Again, it's optional, but this is supposed to help you. I'm thinking it might. The quiz is going to be on chapter 1, which I will get ready to post. So again, thanks for joining us. Any questions that you may have, shoot me an email, or we'll do a question and answer. And let's get ready. This is our first week of Tarrant County economics, so we want to have a great semester, even though it's online. Let's make it as the best it can be. Thanks, and thanks again. Good day.